The next panelist is Sazi Ndwandwa, our director at Gold Hours. And Sazi Ndwandwa is a chartered accountant with extensive senior management and executive experience, which saw him lead and manage people from 2008, when he qualified as a chartered accountant, to the point where he started coaching other leaders in 2017. Ndwandwa is a member of the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, the Black Management Forum, the Association for Advancement of ABASA, Coaches Mentors South Africa, and the Institute of Directors South Africa. And he has successfully led teams and headed up portfolios supported by experienced senior professionals of various cultures, races, genders, and ages. And Sazi, please come forward and be part of our presentation here. The other panelist is General Manager, Strategy and Planning at Eskom Holdings, and that is Matthew Mflathelwa, who is responsible for developing Eskom's long-term strategy, negotiating the Eskom's compact with the shareholder, developing the corporate plan and the associated capital allocation for Eskom line businesses. And he's held multiple roles within Eskom, ranging from operating and maintenance engineering at coal power stations to providing strategic advisory support to executives across multiple business areas within the Eskom group. And he has worked on a number of projects, including several organizational turnaround initiatives, as well as developing the business case for Eskom's transition towards cleaner energy. Matthew, come forward. Let's hear from you. So, we are here, and I've been advised that we're actually going to play a short video. Is that correct?
No, it's the slides.
Is it slides or is it video?
No, it's the slides.
It's the slides, okay. If we can get those slides going so that they give us a background to the topic for discussion. Thanks.
Yes.
Odwa, you go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Program Director. Good afternoon, colleagues. We thought that so that we create more space to focus on the solution when we are responding to the questions from the Program Director, maybe to start by giving just a few background around about the topic that we're dealing with, which is talking about how, as the professional bodies, we can contribute to turn around the strategies to improve the state of the South African economy. So on the slides that we have, we first look at, just to give some little bit of a background, because if you look at our topic, we do talk about the crisis around about Eskom. So we said, maybe let's just first give a little bit of a background of why do we find ourselves where government, they've got the state-owned entities. So what we're saying here is that they established these SOEs as a critical mechanism to assist government to achieve the economic growth. They were established to ensure that the country is able to sustain itself and be self-sufficient. And these SOEs have been with us for quite a long time, way back from around about 1920. And they were very instrumental in shaping the country's economy. And we're saying there that they were given the mandate to exclusive franchise. Some of a good example is Eskom, where we know that they are the only electricity power distributor. And the goal for doing that was just to make sure that these institutions are driving the import substitution. But when we look at around about 1980, we're starting to see the focus there was around about the economic development, which had a huge contribution and high contribution towards the GDP. But when you're starting to look around about the late 1980s, some of these SOEs started to have some element of facing some element of privatization, and which was driven due the financial unsustainability, and also we're starting to see government now starting to have some reduction in terms of the resources that they were providing to these SOEs to support them. And also, because now they have to sustain themselves, they have now to go to the market to raise some funds, and some of them, they were really facing some challenges to actually attract that capital injection so that they are able to implement and fulfill some of the additional projects that they need to implement. Then again, around about the establishment is that we said they become semi-private, and the government will, at some point, I think we've seen it with SAPC at some point, and ESCOM in particular, and with the other SOEs, where government doesn't just automatically give them some grants. They will always evaluate as to whether do they want to subsidy them, and sometimes they have to submit the turnaround plan. So you can see that government was saying you need to be sustainable and drive this economy as per the initial mandate. Then we're indicating that in some of the large SOEs, more especially in the infrastructure development, these entities were separated from the policy-making ministries and located under the Department of Enterprises. I think we are aware around about the dynamics of some of the entities that are not reporting directly to the policy-making departments. Then we look at, we look at this, and we're looking at this because we're looking at to say some of these SOEs are starting to really experience a lot of challenges. I know that in our talk, we talk about ESCOM, but we said maybe let's give a background to say ESCOM is not the only one that find themselves in this situation. For example, at ESCOM, they find themselves that there's high electricity prices. There's a talk about we're sitting with these load shedding because the power stations are unable to provide what we require in terms of the megawatts, high irregular expenditure, outsourcing of the services without developing own capacity, that is within ESCOM, the decline in the profits, despite the increase in the revenue. I think we're linking this increase in the revenue because you can see that every year we talk about the approval by the NER of the tariffs increase for electricity, the downgrading by the rating agency, which is also making it very difficult for ESCOM to raise their own funds and be so dependent to the state to bail them out. I think we are all aware about the SAA that are faced with high airport taxes, the landing, parking, and handling costs, the lack of coordinated government strategies, the fuel costs, and the monetary fluctuations, because where they operate in the environment where they are actually most of the time trading in dollars, in US dollars, and therefore the fluctuation, they have an impact on them. Competition laws, and also the outdated and aging aircraft. I think we've seen in the state capture where we hear out about the leases that they get involved to, and how they were unaffordable, with the result that they are starting to age, which actually put them out of the competition if we compare with the other airlines. The financial inefficiencies and the skill shortage within the SAA. Transnet, the delays and cost escalation in the construction, which resulted in the escalation of the costs because of those delays. There was a lot of criticism around about the role that was played by the boards, that the boards, they were not really providing the clear strategic goals so that they can be able to improve the performance of Transnet. The performance of the Transnet freight rail, which has deteriorated over a number of years, as well as the need to revive unused railway lines for passenger trains. So we know that the preferred mode of delivery has been quite a number of years. It's been rail, but I think we all agree we're all using the roads. You can imagine the number of trucks that we are facing in the roads now because of the unavailability of the railway lines. At the Denel, the competition from development economies, alignment between military acquisition and industrial strategy, and also the international clients, because Denel is providing these the ammunition. So some of the international clients, they opted to say they would rather use their own company so that they maintain the indigenous solution to deal with that. The escalation of geopolitical influences, as well as the overall lack of growth in the global defense industry. The reason why we're listing all these, because these are just examples of the SOEs that we have. We just want to show you the challenges that these SOEs are experiencing vis-a-vis to the main objective that they were established, so that they are able to stimulate and drive the economy of the country. And then if you're looking at the news, I think we've seen quite a lot of what they attract. They attract all the not so good news. Eskom, which is talking about scrambling to save 5 billion for the Kuwait project. That is why we keep on having the lights off. I was thinking that Free State is bad, but ever since I arrived here, every 5 minutes the electricity is gone. Then we know of the post office, that the post office now, the bankruptcy of the post office, because no one is sending the parcels, no one's writing letters. As a result, now they are really struggling to survive, which was one of the thriving SOEs in the past. But because of them not unable to catch up with the changes, then they find themselves in this situation. Then we see that this and the SAA, Denel, Transnet, and Post Office, they approached Treasury where they were requesting nearly 13 billion for them to support them. The press are also telling Parliament that for them to fix the trains, they will require about 7.5 billion. So you can see the things that are there that they need from government to bail them out. The solar homes, so we're saying that with the changes in the environment, people are starting now to move out of the grid because of the load shedding that we experience, with the result that people go for solar, which has an impact in the revenue that Eskom need to generate. SAA, as we know that the situation, the reason why we put in this, that one is particular, that part about the roundabout risk of losing license. SAA was established to be the state airline, but now they find themselves going towards to be privatized. That is why now we're talking about the issues of licenses. Eskom scrabbled to okay, I already dealt with that one. And also, it looks like even us, we can buy SAA because we are saying they value zero. So if you've got R1, you can go and buy SAA. Okay, then I'm hoping this. Yeah. Then we said, because we're going to talk about the economy, this economy that we're talking about, how does it look like? So we look at the recent statistics, the second quarter of 2022, where we're saying that the economic rate is slowing to a long-term potential of 1.5% per annum. And we've noticed that there's an offshore investment of about 222 billion through outward measures. So now the investors are actually leaving the country and starting to look at the options that are available international. Local container shipments for export, which is declining by 17.5%, which is due to the impact of the international supply chain distribution, the load shedding, as well as the flooding in KZN. As you know, that KZN is one of the main contributor in terms of around about the shipment of the containers. I think most of the people that used M3, not the people that always fly to Durban, if you sometimes drive, I think you can imagine the trucks that you see on the road there. Then also on the 6th of September, the states of South Africa, they also released the country's latest GDP figures. And in that, they indicated that our economy is contracting by about 0.7%. And also again, citing the load shedding, the devastating floods in KZN as contributing to the decline. And the South African economy is seen as heading towards collapse, and mainly because of the us not being successful to deal with the triple challenge of unemployment, inequality, as well as poverty, with the result that our tax base is stagnating, and we're starting to see now more people starting to rely on the state to survive. Hence, we see now social development, on the other hand, keep on paying more and more grants to support the people because they are unemployed. And then lastly on this one is that the shortage of electricity is a huge constraint on the economic growth and job creation. I think here I was supposed to put in the brackets, because this statement, copied as it is, remember when President was had a family meeting, and one day around about July, this is what he said. Okay, already on the last slide there. Then on the last slide, if we're talking about the role of the professional bodies, so we're talking about the professional bodies, we expect them to be more dedicated to the advancement of knowledge and practice of the profession through developing, supporting, regulating, and promoting professional standards and ethical competence. The public professional bodies should or are concerned with the public benefit as well as the reputation of their professionals. So we tend to be more selfish, looking inwards of us. And also we're saying that there's an expectation there that the professional bodies must protect the public interest by building social and economic capital. And lastly, professional bodies have to play a role in improving productivity within their respective industries. So this is the background that we just gave. We thought that so that when we respond to the program director's question, everybody is able to move with us as to what is the consideration in terms of how we see and how we're responding to those questions. Thanks, program director.
Thank you very much, Odwa, for your outline, your presentation. Now, you mentioned so many entities and all of them have got issues, but they did have those professionals that are members of the professional bodies, am I correct? And they sit on the audit and risk committees, all of those, you mentioned them. Now, the question is, why are these professional people who sit on the audit and risk committees and so on performing differently in the state-owned entities and in government compared to what goes on in corporate or private sector? Do they use different standards when it gets to state-owned entities compared to what goes on in the private sector? And I would like to believe that the professionals have received the same type of education, same type of mentoring, and do sit on the committees and boards of the private sector. What's the difference? You want to go first, Sazi?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for that question. I think it's a valid point that you are raising, because at the end of the day, whether you are running something that's in the public sector, whether it's academia, whether it's a private sector, you're running a business enterprise at the end of the day. And you expect that business enterprise, should fulfill its mandate, whatever it is, and therefore be self-sustaining. So what you're asking is a question that really forces us to look at ourselves and to say, well, at the end of the day, we as these professionals, what's been going on. And I think one of the speakers earlier on spoke about going back to basics. And if I just take a moment to take us back to the basics of our fundamental training as auditors and accountants, it's really around the fact that, when you manage yourself as an individual, or you manage a team, you manage an institution, it's really relying on the systems and processes that you put in place. And those systems have got three objectives. One is to make sure that whatever information comes through the system is reliable for you to make decisions as management, as well as people who are outside the organization, whether they want to invest, whether they want to do oversight, whether they are the owners of South Africa, which is RSA incorporated shareholders or citizens. Number two, the objective is that your operations will be effective and efficient. Effective in the sense that you deliver to your customer, whoever your customer is, in a way that makes sense to them and adds value to them according to the contract that you have with them. Efficient in the sense that there isn't wastage of the resources that are there, which is really what we are seeing a lot of. Number three is to make sure that you comply with the laws and regulations so that you don't think you are doing well, but how you are doing things is actually against the rules of the game and against what has been set by Parliament and the lawmakers. So, in short, the answer is that everyone applies the same rules, right? There are however, other factors that come into play. For instance, if you look at, and I think Vonani talked about it, some of the skills that perhaps as auditors we are not taught are around business acumen, is around negotiation, is around influencing those who are in power. Because many institutions that are auditors, assurance providers, one of the things that they struggle with is getting the ear of those people that they are supposed to advise and give assurance to. Because people pay money, but people also pay attention, and that is a reflection of the value that they see in what you have to offer. So what it really talks to is a need for us as a profession in the public sector. I mean, I don't want to ignore the fact that there are things that are beginning to come out even in the private sector. Whether it's through the profession, I might mention KPMGs, I might mention whatever, that say, well, maybe it looked like a very good picture, but now when Steinhoff and Enron and all these things happen, it's an indication that things might not be as rosy as they look. But at the end of the day, it is a need for us as the profession, looking at academia in terms of the training that we get to make sure that the role that is required by society is a role that we can fulfill. Traditionally, at the origin of the profession, it was a backward looking to account and tell a story of what happened. But it seems more and more that the need is becoming around saying, how do we become forward looking, risk managing, and strategic focus? So the short answer is that it really points to the fact that as part of our training and part of our competencies to be able to fulfill the role, it's something that we need to look at not only at this point in time when we become professionals, but in the training institutions, including the academic side of it.
I may repeat the question maybe for a shorter answer. But, what's the difference in the public sector vis-a-vis the corporate sector? Because it's the same people with the same education. How come the impression, at least in the South African context, is that it's a free-for-all of sorts that's going on in state-owned entities and government departments. Yet we have professional people who sit in all those oversight committees and you name them, they are there. Including yourself, Matthew, as an engineer on top of that with your background and being at ESCOM. I sit here and say, Matthew has got all the appropriate credentials, but why can't he keep the lights on? What's wrong? And then we know there's money being borrowed and bailouts and so on. What goes wrong?
Should I take that?
Please go ahead.
So let me attempt. I think, to be fair, it's not a simple answer that we can give to this question. But before you even ask this question, I was reflecting on why is it that the state of state-owned entities in general is in such disrepair, and in light of the professional bodies that we are referring to. I think it starts with patriotism. I think for me, and this is why I wear this badge around, I'm not a politician, I remind myself why I'm in a state-owned entity. And for you, working in government is not an easy job. It's a thankless job. You don't get paid half as much or as well as the private sector. And therefore the
No,
quality...
maybe you work in one part of the government. That's
Maybe,
not so
but
good
from
for
where
you.
I'm sitting,
Other parts where we read them.
from where I'm sitting, the perks and the remuneration, as much as, I mean, we see a lot of information about ESCOM, for example, but in general, an engineer with my qualifications, experience, etc., can attract a lot more money and with a lot more obstacles to deal with in private sector than in government. So you've got two types of people in government: those who don't have a choice and can only work in government, and those that have committed their lives to working in government. And the unfortunate part is I think we're moving towards a place where we are remaining with more of those who don't have a choice. And my view is part of the problem is that the type of people we may have, and it's not the qualification, it's the quality of the person, is that they are there because it is for other reasons besides serving that purpose, because it's a sacrifice. The other part, and I will use ESCOM as an example. When I joined ESCOM was one of the most reputable companies to work for. It was a privilege to work for ESCOM. I took pride in working for ESCOM, and fast forward 12 years later, I cannot wear an ESCOM t-shirt to a mall without attracting attention, the wrong kind of attention. So these are the kind of paradigms and views we've created about the states and state-owned entities, and I think we have a role as professionals to also counter that narrative and say there are professionals in state-owned entities, there are capable people in state-owned entities. However, we do get in our own way, but it can be fixed. I'm optimistic that it can be
Sure.
fixed, and that's why I'm still there.
All right. Now, the topic speaks for itself anyway. How can professional bodies contribute to turnaround strategies and improve the state of the South African economy? Both as support for most of the state-owned entities play that particular role, but they also are proactively involved in competing with other entities and helping the country be competitive. But I'm going to ask a practical question again, that let's say the post office, the report suggests 700 million rands was not paid over medical premiums of 22,000 staff members or employees of the post office, besides its own problems of not being run properly and whatever. That simple housekeeping thing. Odwa, you can talk to this. How would it happen? I mean, where would the accountants have been? The financial managers have been? The, again, oversight committees are responsible for this. Where were they when premiums, medical premiums of 22,000 employees of the post office to the tune of 700 million was not paid over to the medical aid schemes? How does it happen, really?
Thank you very much, Program Director, for that question. These issues, to get to where we see them, they start small. And when they start more small, nobody cares. I know that from the audit perspective, for example, the audit team will go there and tell management that you are working on accounting transactions on a daily basis. On a simple thing that the money that you should be banking on that day, you're not doing it. And recommend that you put in control so that you can deal with that. But because the leadership is not responsive and deal with those things, they're starting to build up. And when they build up, they also starting to create opportunities where now it's either it can be the officials or it can be the suppliers, where they can starting to see that the controls in this environment are lacking, and therefore there can be opportunity for me to start embezzling the funds. And then it start growing now. The funds that should have been going towards sustaining and improve the institution, you're starting to forgo those revenue. And you're starting to lose that, then your funds that you generate is starting now to become bigger and bigger. Then it results now, we're getting surprised now when we're starting to see the impact of those small things that we should have done on a daily basis to make sure that there are controls. I happen to be involved, for example, one of the big issue that was that we discovered at some point at Post Office, if you remember, they're starting to support SASA around about the pension of the grants. And because of the lack of the controls, people starting to take advantage of that. I think all of us, we are aware of how many people do we see when we go to the MTM, they're carrying a lot of SASA cards and starting to draw the money. And you ask yourself, where do they get those cards? I know some of them is because of the loans, but some of them, they took advantage of the fact that the controls within Post Office are lacking. Yeah, there's the load shedding.
5 minutes.
And they take advantage of that. And those are some of the funds that you are losing. As a result, that we end up seeing ourselves in this crisis. It's something that we could have prevented.
Anyway, so what can professional bodies do to make sure that the lights are kept on? What should have done?
I want to. Can I genuinely respond to that?
Yes.
Because I was speaking to him earlier, and I was saying, you know, the reason, and it's linked to what Odwa is saying. These things don't happen overnight. You know, it's a slow deterioration that continues unabated. And in my view, professional bodies need to take more of an activist role in how the state is managing the assets. As professionals, I think it is our role to provide objective and critical thinking out there. I think what is happening in South Africa, unfortunately, and specifically in the energy industry, is that we get persuaded by the politics and we lose sight of the real issues. And as professional bodies, I think it's our obligation to call it out and say, guys, this is not the right decision in the interest of the country based on facts and not propaganda and all sorts of things. So that is the role. Number two is, I think professional bodies should, in some way, shape or form, encourage young professionals to go and serve. And whether it's something we do deliberately, the first 2-3 years of your career, go and serve government. Because without a competent state, none of us are going to survive in the future. So those are some of the practical, I think, steps we can take going forward.
Well, we're talking about turnaround strategy, right? And again, I'm pleased that I'm an outsider, so I can speak from that position. And with a little bit of media background on top of it. So I actually sometimes wonder, why is it that it's the media that seems to be more concerned about what's going on in especially the space that we are discussing now than the people who operate in that space. Right? Most of the things that we know did not come from the professionals, the bodies at least, professional bodies, but they came via media. But via media, thanks to the whistleblowers on one side. And whistleblowing, to my mind, is something, or those individuals who are whistleblowers, the bodies that exist do not really protect them. And we know of a few out there currently who are also living in fear because of threats against them for having come out openly and shared with us what was going on. What is the view within the bodies, the professional bodies, regarding whistleblowing and the protection of whistleblowers? I mean, we can talk, what you call it, turnaround strategies, but what are you turning around when you are not going to be when you are not going to be ethical anyway, or you're not going to be transparent or do whatever you do with appropriate governance in place, including the fact that whistleblowers are not protected. So to some of us, when you talk turnaround strategies, how much is it going to cost the taxpayer again? Because as long as you say turnaround, then it's like it justifies you to go and ask for 20 billion rands more. That's what it means, without seeing any value being delivered. You want to take that, Sazi?
Yeah. I think one of the things that we see happening, and I think you raised the point, is that in any of these institutions, there's always an accountant. Now, when we're talking about accountants and assurance providers and people who are part of that value chain, some of them are internal auditors who are always there during the year. Some of them are external auditors who come afterwards. Some of them are the actual accountant to do the procurement and the accounting. So when we look at these things and you look at the interrelated systems, because you're not just looking, at one ministry. You're looking at the interrelation between the systems, the Department of Justice, the department, and all of these need to come together because they form one value chain in terms of the justice system. Now, as the professional bodies themselves, because some of these people who would blow the whistle are members of the body themselves, right? So that ability, again, to be able to have the ear of leadership so that we can have the political will and we can garner these numbers as the professional bodies, right? In a sense to say, well, we've got SAIGA here, but it's not just SAIGA members who are operating in these sectors. It's SAIGA and coming together as those professional bodies and being that voice that says, when our members go and speak about these things, it's not just an ethical issue on their side, but the fact that there are realities where people say there's something going on and, there's a photo that's put to say, oh, there's your child. We know your wife drops off your child at such and such a time. It's that kind of protection, and as professional bodies to come together as a united voice that says, well, the accounting and the finances in South Africa, they go through our hands, whether it's the budgeting process, whether it's the spending, the procurement, all the way to the end. It's really about the professional bodies coming together to the protection of not only their members, but everyone involved in that, and calling those in oversight and the other bodies, government, to come to the party.
Now, there's another point, thanks for that. There's another point that was mentioned earlier, and again, it's in the public domain. Going back to our key word here, turnaround strategy. We're told by the Auditor General of South Africa, the office, that actually your different tiers of government have got problems. That is a widely known fact. But it gets worse when you are told that where you live, the basic services are not going to come your way, even though we told budget this, budget that, budget this. Now, and I would suggest that it's typical in South Africa that we actually know what the problem is. Doesn't matter what problem we talk about. We can even project or anticipate a problem. We know. But for some reason, we never get around to doing it the right way. Is there any particular problem with, I don't know what to call it, maybe professional culture in South Africa, especially in the financial space? Maybe that's where the turnaround should happen. I don't know what kind of turnaround should happen there, Odwa.
Thank you very much for that question. Yes, I think I remember the late Kimi Makwetu, when he was presenting the general report in 1 year, when he was asked by the journalist of how does he feel when he presented the outcomes, he indicated that he feels like fighting with a pig in the mud. And while you're fighting with the pig in the mud for survival so that you can get out of the mud, the pig enjoys to be in the mud because that is where you find the pig.
Can I put it on Twitter then? What you just said?
So it shows the type of environment that we're dealing with, where we were keeping on reporting, Auditor General keep on reporting on the same findings now and again, and nobody was taking action to actually deal and correct those, which is become a societal issue that we maybe prefer to take the shortcuts because there are some level of entitlement that people are actually looking at. But without really looking at what are the strategies from the public sector side, and I think the amendments that were approved by Parliament, where they give the Auditor General additional powers of enforcement, those powers we're starting to see the impact, where people starting now to realize that if they're not responding to those powers, they empower Auditor General to recommend that the recovery is made directly from your own pocket. And then it changed the total ball game, because people now, they know that if I'm not dealing with this matter, it's going to affect with me directly. Yesterday, one of the speakers talked about the way that we neglect to look at the public purse, forgetting that this public purse that we're talking about is actually your own purse. Because where government get money for their purse is getting it from you. But because now it changed from the right pocket to the left pocket, we're taking care of the right pocket, but when it is on the left pocket, we care less. And so those are the culture that we need to work on to calculate and change. But I think the enforcements, I think I'm definitely see that we're going to see some change around about those matters.
I'm going to take a round of questions if you have any or comments. Let's hear from you. And I'll take you first at the back there, sir. And then the lady here, gentleman at the back, and come to you, Tate Kumbi. Now, as part of the topic for discussion, we talk about turning the economy around. What contribution can what we are discussing now with professional bodies contributing to turnaround strategies, what impact can that have on the economy? Matthew, you'd like to comment?
Sure. I mean, again, I think the introduction that Odwa gave on the slides is indicative of the role that state-owned entities specifically play in growing the economy. So the first thing is, the first direct impact is ESCOM itself. I think the load shedding itself is not helping the economy. It's actually constraining growth. So that is clear. The other state-owned entities are becoming a burden on the state. So we are now taking money, instead of investing it in or generating more value with that money, we are actually eroding the value, which again, for me, points back to the caliber of people that are running those institutions. And ultimately, I believe that the problems that we are discussing here are ultimately leadership problems. For me, audit is a service that is provided to leaders to act and take accountability. Auditors cannot take action. It's the leaders that take the action. And the lack of action is what has led us to where we are. And we've accepted it, we've become numb to it. And I think as professional bodies, as civil society, as people, as shareholders of these state-owned entities, I think it is unfortunate that we are not more of an activist when it comes to these things.
I nearly used the word, are you from the Eastern Cape?
No, I'm from Soweto.
Okay, somebody who's from the Eastern Cape?
I'm from the Eastern Cape.
You are. What is the expression that would be used in the Eastern Cape when you're talking about a problem that is like beyond your control and it's happening and you can see it, and then you just use one word to express your feelings or your observations of it? Yeah, it can't be nyaga nyaga in the Eastern Cape. It's something else. I do have friends who use it, but I don't think it's appropriate here. We won't use it. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Tim. The first thing that comes to my mind is, as auditors and accountants, we audit and we account based on a policy that has been passed. Is there a possibility that we are auditing and accounting on a business plan of government that can never be appropriate for the age and the time? You've got a business model that says you need to provide a service and make profits at the same time if you're an ESCOM or a Transnet. Does that model really do exist? And so that is the first question, to say, are we auditing spending time over something that will never work? the question might be, what is the mandate of education? Maybe the right question is, what should be the mandate of education if we are looking forward? And then the other one, I'm glad Matthew is there. I ask myself, are we also moving too fast at the very same time? And we hear things of clean energy, for instance. Do decision makers consider the overall ecosystem? If I'm saying I'm going to use renewable energy as ESCOM, ever considered the socioeconomic effect of the people in Mpumalanga whose lives are dependent and based on the mining sector, for instance? Or are we having those silos type of decisions taken in the boardroom without considering the overall impact of the economy at large? Thanks.
Thank you. Let's come to the lady here, the red dress in front.
Thank you, Program Director. Good afternoon, colleagues. When we were talking about the problem statement, as Odwa has mentioned, is that the profession, the impact the professional bodies have on the communities. Firstly, I would state that the professionals, they are not operating alone in the economic sector. Here in this room, it's full of auditors. At least it's better for them because they are working with other professionals. But we've got some other colleagues, our colleagues that are working in the public sector. And when they are there, they are not alone. They are with other people. They are with politicians. They are with other professional bodies that are not belonging to the accounting bodies or auditors. And there's a lot of influence. I think this comes to us in this room on how do we equip our people when they are outside there. I know that most of us, we are the auditors, we are in the right place, but there are other accountants that are not within the environment that we are operating in, of which, as the professional body, I want to know how do we equip our colleagues that are there, and how do we influence the political administrators of these organizations, because there are many factors that we see when we audit around that influence the unethical behaviors. We know that when you are in a professional organization, there are ethical workshops that are being done to make you aware, even if something you do, you thought it was not unethical, then you can get some scenarios. And then now I want to know, how do you equip the people now who are there in order for them to be fit to work? Because I think most of the reasons why you are here now is due to the unethical behaviors, as well as, I think maybe,
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, ma'am. You think they were not aware, the people who behave unethically? I'm just asking, as we go to the gentleman at the back there, Prof, but I'm just curious. Would you say that somebody who behaves in an unethical manner in their professional setting is not aware? I may be ignorant, I don't know. I would think that you are doing it deliberately, whatever it is that is wrong, especially, as I say, in the professional setting. Otherwise, why audit anyway? If you, the auditor or accountant, are going to be unethical in your conduct, I don't know, because whoever you are auditing, in other words, you have the mindset of the same people that you are trying to get to be on the straight and narrow. But I'll leave it to the panelists to comment on. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I think for me, I think professional bodies have lost their purpose. I think professional bodies has a significant role to play in what you regard as a turnaround strategy. And I think for me is that if I look at the accountancy profession, which is the accounting and auditing, they're doing the same thing that they did in 1970s, 1960s. The only thing which has changed now, their processes have now been automated. Value added has not changed. And I think professional bodies must really look at their purpose in terms of how they're going to contribute to organization sustainability. And then we can speak about sustainability of the globe, the people, etc. The 4 companies that were put up over there, Eskom, SAIGA, the NEL, and Transnet. 15 years to 20 years ago, Eskom was rated number 1 in the world in energy. What has gone wrong? I don't think anyone investigated, and I thought auditors would have picked it up. If you go to SAA, if you look at SAA holistically, and before they're in the debacle that they are in, they sold their most lucrative route to America, to Etihad, which is now one of the top profit-performing airlines globally. If you look at them now, they sold their IP to whoever they are in America, and now the NEL is in a mess that they can't even sustain themselves. And then if you look at Transnet gave flowery financial statements in the last one, purely because they revalued their properties. Their properties will never make money for them because they are all administrative properties, but yet we're giving them nice audit reports. And I'm asking myself, and this happened with the others, all other state-owned entities which revalued their properties sold those properties in the next year and thereafter just went downhill. Have we capacitated as professional bodies our members to be aware of those benchmarks, trends, etc., to minimize the risk to our society? And for me, unless the professional bodies start fulfilling their purpose in serving humanity and citizens, we're going to be lost forever. I like the idea that he said that we are putting in business models because we want to copy the rest of the world. And yet we haven't seen whether our business models are practical, implementable, and successful in our own country.
Sure.
We leaders, 90% of NASA's staff are Africans.
Yeah.
Why are we not driving the world? I'd like professional bodies to
Because
think
we can't
about
run
that.
the trains, you see, that's the problem. I mean, we used to have trains, now we don't have them. We lost the trains along the way, so before we go into space, can we just get those trains back online? Please do the basics right. Mr. Gumbe is here, can you give him the chance to hear this, and then I'll get you to respond, and probably I'll steal 5 minutes from the next speaker, and then we close this session. There he is, there next to you. Sorry, Mr. Gumbe. For you.
Good afternoon, gents. I think I just want to change gears a bit and maybe ask about the elephant in the room. So, materiality is our favorite phrase. You know, it's our favorite approach. It's our favorite get out of jail card. We don't play too often. We lead with it. You know, and I say this because I believe you need to limit because you're working in with finite resources and you want to deliver within a pre-agreed sort of mandate. But is that not the root cause of what we're looking at? The fact that we never look at the problem, or we never look at, or we don't evaluate the entire value chain. We look at the aspects that would be material and affect or lead to misstatements further down. So that's my first question. That is it not yet time to perhaps revisit the materiality so that we are empowered to look at and evaluate the entire process, the entire value chain? So that's one. The second part I want to speak to speaks to consequence management and performance scorecards. The last time I heard of a performance scorecard was when shadow ministers and shadow ministries rate their counterparts. You know, so it becomes a pseudo evaluation. And I'm not saying it in jest because I know that there are other instruments to but what about that notion can we actually transfer so that it becomes a valid system that can be used to communicate and engage public opinion and public sentiment about the performance of the state-owned entities and the related ministers who are.
Sure.
So you'll see the angle I'm taking is more measurement and not necessarily to blame. Lastly, there's audit and there's governance, right? I'm worried about the governance aspect. What can we do from the opinions that we express to drive and activate the fiduciary duties that we expect of those office bearers? Because the measurement instruments are there. They may not be for you as an auditor, but from a governance point of view, fiduciary duty is defined. It's a common law aspect. Maybe just the last one. I want to speak to ombudsmen and other bodies that we don't quite mention. You know, regulators, ombudsmen. If you look at a draft law in SA, towards the end, before, I think one of the second last paragraphs is that this law will be given effect to through the creation of the following office. And then it takes about 15 years to create that office. Okay? So, what can we do using the ones that exist, the ombuds, the regulators, to close the ecosystem and make sure we can get to that ultimate consequence management? Starting with that materiality, because I think we do have the job by design. Thanks.
Good. Okay, let me give you an opportunity to respond. Who takes which question?
I'll take the. I'll take the clean energy socio-economic impact question. I'll take. I think that's the most relevant one for me.
Sazi?
I'll take the one around strategy and leadership, as well as the ones around, our professionals and supporting them out there when they will work with other people who don't belong to professional bodies.
Then you'll sweep. You'll wrap it up for us. Let's start with you then.
Yeah, I think I'll combine the two questions. The one was, are we auditing outdated business models and processes, and hence we keep finding audit findings? The second one is, are we adopting models or frameworks that are not appropriate for us? And let me start with the business models and the auditing. So I think there's general agreement in the energy industry, and I'll use Eskom as an example, that Eskom's business model is outdated, and hence we are separating the business into three parts. So that is agreed. However, at the same time, and it links to the other questions around audit and audit findings, I think there are things that are known. There are things that are not because of outdated processes. It's just we do not respect. It's a lawlessness, for lack of a better word. I'm using just simple words. We do not respect our own processes, and we do not take them seriously, and therefore we keep doing the same thing. So for me, it's that is not a business model issue. It's not a process issue. It's a discipline issue. It's accountability. It's leadership. I always go back to that. Let's talk about clean energy and perhaps again I will call it the narrative that is being created. And this is why I am going to encourage you guys, although you are auditors and accountants, to really be curious about this topic and do the work yourself. I was also saying earlier that I'm going to try and publish more of the data so that people can make up their own minds. Let me start off by saying the need to transition from fossil fuels to cleaner energy is no longer a question. It's inevitable. What we should argue about is how we go about it and how quickly we go about it. That is a fair argument. Now, from an Eskom perspective, and I think generally agreed, it's not going to be an overnight thing. And it's not a binary thing. It's not saying because ESCOM is no longer, promoting coal investments does not mean ESCOM does not want coal assets anymore. It just means going into the future, we are no longer going to invest in power stations, coal-fired power stations. Think Medupi. Medupi is taking 10 to 15 years to build at about almost 200 billion. These are long-term decisions. By 2035, 2040, we'll be talking a different story. We cannot be making those decisions today. That's the first consideration. The second consideration is practically from a construction and from a price perspective, renewables have become more competitive. They have, the prices from the first bid window that was launched in South Africa to the current bid window 5, barring the Russia-Ukraine war, 85% reduction in price. So again, from a financial perspective, it makes sense. Then there's the little problem of environmental policy and the Paris Agreement. So if we are going to continue in this trajectory, it will have financial implications, both from a competitiveness perspective as a country, because we are going to be limited in how we can compete with other countries that provide lower carbon emission products. So there are tax implications from an export perspective. There are also financial implications from managing our own air quality standards. So I'm sure some people might have heard the number of 300 billion being thrown around. If we invest 300 billion in our current existing plant, remember, this is not adding more megawatts or energy. It's like adding a fancy exhaust pipe to your car. It's not going to give you a faster car. It's just going to make it a cleaner car, right? 300 billion. This is about 7 to 12% impact on your tariff. Is this something we want to do? So do we take that? Do we buy, do we invest in an exhaust pipe and a fuel oil, and a petrol engine car? Or do we buy, an electric vehicle? Which, yes, it does not cover the full distance that you would like to cover. It's got its shortcomings, true. But at least now you've got another car. It's not a fancy exhaust pipe. So that's the argument we are making, to say we will have to make investments. But based on what we see into the future, we think for South Africa, it is the best decision to start transitioning from this point on. And this also takes into account the socio-economic impact. So there's a lot of work we're doing in Mpumalanga, which again, I think we've not done well to publish or publicize. It doesn't help that we have load shedding. I don't think anyone would care about what we are doing if we cannot supply the base. So,
it's hard. Yeah. It's hard being at ESCOM these days, right?
Very difficult.
You say stuff, it sounds great, but then we remember that you are from ESCOM.
Exactly. So I have to work twice as hard to convince you that there's remotely a possibility that what I'm saying is true. So I understand.
We understand.
Yeah.
Sazi?
I think let me start with the question of, professionals who are in environments where they're working with people who are not professionals, if I can call it that. I personally know so many examples of people who have left the profession, going to a department with very good intentions. They might last 2 months, they might last 2 years, but the bottom line is that they come back because they are frustrated, they are being sabotaged, because now they are breaking and they are going against the grain of this culture. Now, how do you support that? I think there might be short-term solutions which would be band-aids. For instance, in our training, we always say, well, what's the root cause of what, of all this that is happening? And many of these things are just symptoms of what you are calling patriotism. It's a culture, it's ethics, it's values. Many companies will have values, they sit there on the wall, they gather dust and no one really knows about those. But really it's talking about them and making them real as the leadership of their organization. So in the long run, I think the gentleman from CIPA said, our training and education and gearing of our institutions and bodies has been geared based on an old model that is no longer there, that is based on a world that does not exist anymore. It's backward looking, always telling us what has gone wrong. 3 years back, say, well, if I want to cross this road and the traffic light information is 3 years old, I'm probably going to get run over. So what we can do is really that partnership between the academic institutions and the professional bodies and driving this, because you still find that serving in the public sector has a very low profile. If you're going to go in the public sector, you're probably taking a very big career risk because you're going to be associated with things that are not going well, number one. And when you're looking for another job, there is that perception and you paint it with the same brush. Number two, financially, you're probably not going to be doing so well either because, government doesn't pay as well in most instances. So it's really about going back to the root and saying, how do we educate our people around this business acumen, around being able to analyze and see patterns and be strategic thinkers, and also being client focused to say, what is the need? How do I reach this person? Almost like a sales type of thing. So I've been talking to them, I'm telling the irregular expenditure for years. And I think they know that they are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And right now, the issue is that the culture and the environment there is so bad. So it's really about increasing the profile of public sector so that when you are that professional, you are not just the only one or the only two in a department of 400 people, all right? That's the long-term one. In the short term, I think professional bodies, through associations such as these, through also, for instance, alumni bodies, as we were talking about with the Auditor General, through various ways and even interpersonal, so that you are not in this thing all by yourself. I think that is the support that we need. But in the long term, culture, as they say, eats strategy for breakfast or something like that. And as an individual, it's very difficult for you to go against an entire environment and culture that is there actively going against you because you are there disrupting other people's benefits. Okay. Lindani, I think you asked a question. Né? Now, I'm quite passionate about leadership, and you are right, Many of the issues when I go and do strategy facilitation, it always comes down to leadership, right? Because leadership is the one that sets the tone at the top. Leadership is the one that monitors performance, and it's very easy to see if leadership is doing well or not, right? Whether they have a performance scorecard or not, if the lights are not on, we know it's not going well, right? If you are not able to pay your staff, we know it's not going well. Whether you are a municipality in the Eastern Cape, whether you are the post office, whatever the case may be, right? For the people at leadership positions, it's very easy to see if they are not doing well, right, on the performance side. But one of the very important things when you study leadership is that many of the most successful leaders in the world, they admit, I'm only right 40%, 30% of the time. But the key difference is this. If I have a strategy and there's someone who works with me who says, if I was in your position, I would go left. You are saying I must go right, but now I'm going to go left and I'm going to have little meetings in between. It takes much longer to find out that that strategy is not the right one because the implementation takes so long, right? You're fighting all these other battles, okay? So the question of whether it's a right strategy or the wrong strategy, only time tells that at the end of the day, right? What is very important, which is a point that I think Dumisani raised, to say auditors, they don't take decisions. They are there to empower and to give information and to say, this is the root cause, these are the patterns that we are seeing, this is what's happening in other countries. When you make these decisions, it was based on that context and that context. That curriculum for education in Canada or Finland, right? Their socio-economic situation is completely different to our own. You understand? Therefore, if we want to take that, this is how we might put it here. And I think the other thing is also around our professional bodies, the output of academic research. You understand? I heard Dr. Madiba, Cameron is here. The people who are writing this, being able to use those and as part of our continuing professional development, not just on the technical things, but on the strategic overall things that lend to how the country that we live in and that we're going to live for our children is going to be in the future. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thanks. And Odwa, you can summarize and we end this panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director. I think the last contribution that I will make is that I think as the professional bodies, I think we need just to go sit back and look at what is our strength and what are the things that we can influence so that we can see a change. And I always look at even the work that I do to say, didn't we overstay, for example, focusing on auditing the financial statements? Is there any value that we are giving to the citizens of this country? by looking at just the numbers. We've been looking at the financial statements. I think that part of financial reporting should have been on autopilot by now. That, as a result, is not a concern. And therefore, when I go and look at the public sector, I'm looking at what is the mandate of this institution, what drives their targets, what they want to achieve, and did they achieve that? And so that we can be able to link it to the lived experience of the citizens. So I think that as the professional bodies, we should be more focusing around about that to say, where do we open those doors so that we can influence that change, so that we are able to change the status quo? Very interesting comment that was made by the CEO of ASP yesterday, which I slept over it, where she was saying the financial statements should be reporting of what is key. But if you're looking at the current financial statements now, is there anything that you can pick up on those financial statements? It's thousands and hundreds of pages, but there's nothing to take out. So can we go back and the professional bodies influence what should be seen as part of those financial statements? I think my learned friend Sazi talked about influencing the curriculum. I don't know whether sometimes we are shy of the public sector, that everything that we want to study what is happening in the private sector. And then we said, after you've learned what is in the private sector, then we say, go and swim, see yourself in the public sector, what you can do. With the result that maybe the recommendations that you're providing is irrelevant recommendations. So also, as the public bodies, we need to go and influence that, create that passion and an interest that someone even studying a standard 2 is passionate and say, when I'm old, I'm going to work as a public sector. And I think it's the environment that we allow that everybody think that to be successful, you need to be in the private sector and not in the public sector space. Although if you're looking for the private sector to thrive, they depend on the public sector. So we need to fix the public sector to be okay. Driving engagement around about the accountability ecosystem, I think is something that we need to drive, to consistently engage ourselves to say, with this accountability system, we should be sitting in that table and contribute what? We tend to live in the accountability system. Some of the people that are very key, that have valuable influence for us to change the status quo. I know that, for example, as the professionals, sometimes we say, I want to protect my independence. There are people that I cannot speak to. And some of the people that we compromise is the people that go and speak directly with the citizens that can give us the valuable insights. We've been program directors, part of the audit, been very scared to engage the civil society. And the civil society, they are there to add value to the citizens. And we are saying in our own corner, we want to add value to the citizens, but we don't go and have the engagement with the people that are already operating in that space. So I think we've got a lot of work to do as the professional bodies chair to go back and really say, how do we pave our way forward? We cannot allow that we find ourselves to be like the entities like Kodak. I don't think is there anyone that is using the product Kodak. Maybe some of our colleagues, they don't even know that product because it died long time ago, because Kodak never anticipated that today we'll be using the phone to take pictures, but not the camera. Similarly to post office, that they sit and relax and never anticipate that today I'll never write a telegram, I'll never write a letter. If I want to communicate, I'm just going to send an SMS, which is going to be constant and arrive on the other side now. So as the public bodies, so that we don't become irrelevant, we need to go back, sit back, and starting to pave our way and say, how do we see ourselves in the next 10 or 50 years to come? Thanks.
No, thanks very much. The panelists, Sazi and Ndwandwa, thank you. Odwa, Duda, and Matthew Mflathelwa. I appreciate your insights, inputs, and ideas. Now, the next presentation is going